Hey there. So, picture this. It's the spring of 1945. The Third Reich is collapsing. Allied soldiers are pushing through the rubble of Germany. And among those soldiers are some very unusual men. They're not there to capture bridges or enemy commanders. They're hunting for people. Their targets are hidden in mountain labs, in wind tunnels, in underground factories. They have a list. And on that list are names like Wernher von Braun, Arthur Rudolph, Kurt D. Buss. The world's leading experts on rockets, chemical weapons, aeromedicine. Many of them, just months before, were working for the Nazis. And the American mission, classified under the name Operation Paperclip, had one goal: to find them and bring them home. Welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is the Curiosity Compendium. Today, we're diving into one of the most morally complex and consequential operations of the 20th century. Episode 25, Operation Paperclip, the scientists, the secrets, and the space race. Now, to understand Paperclip, we have to understand the moment. World War II had just ended. The Soviet Union and the United States, allies against Hitler, were now staring each other down across a devastated Europe. It was becoming very clear, very fast, that the next great conflict would be a technological one. And in the ruins of Germany, the spoils weren't just territory or gold, they were brains. The Nazi war machine had produced terrifyingly advanced technology. The V-2 rocket, the first ballistic missile, which rained down on London and Antwerp, killing thousands. The men who built it were geniuses, and both the US and the USSR wanted them. So the race began. American intelligence officers, led by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, were given a directive: deny these scientific minds and their research to the Soviets, and secure them for the United States. But there was a problem, a big, ethical problem. How do you bring former members of the Nazi Party, some of whom were directly implicated in the horrors of the regime, into the United States? The solution was a bureaucratic sleight of hand. They would be cleaned for entry. Dossiers were whitewashed. Disturbing pasts were minimized or erased. The term paperclip came from the simple paperclips attached to their new, sanitized files. With that, over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, along with their families, were quietly brought to America. And the most famous of these was, of course, Wernher von Braun. As a young man, he was the brilliant technical director of the V-2 program. That program, we now know, was built on atrocity. It used slave labor from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp. Thousands of prisoners died under brutal conditions to build those rockets. Von Braun was a member of the SS. He had, at minimum, knowledge of these conditions. This is the inescapable shadow. Yet, in America, he was reborn. He became the charismatic, visionary face of the American space program. The man who sold the public on the dream of going to the moon with televised appearances on Disney. He was, as the saying went, a man who aimed for the stars, but sometimes hit London. That contradiction is the heart of Operation Paperclip. Which brings us to the second act of this story, the secrets. It wasn't just rocket scientists. Paperclip imported a whole spectrum of dark knowledge. There were chemists who had worked on nerve agents. There were doctors who had conducted cruel, often lethal, experiments on prisoners. Their data, harvested unethically, was considered too valuable to ignore. The argument made in Washington was one of grim pragmatism. If we don't take this knowledge, the Soviets will. And in the Cold War calculus, that was unacceptable. So, these men were set to work at U.S. Army installations at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and eventually at a new, top-secret place called Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. They weren't just working for America. They were shaping its technological soul in the post-war era. And that shaping leads directly to the third part of our story, the space race. Because without Paperclip, the space race as we know it simply wouldn't have happened, or America would have lost it decisively. Von Braun and his team, initially restricted to military missile work, were chafing at the bit. They wanted to explore space. Their Redstone rocket became the Jupiter C. And on January 31st, 1958, after the Soviet Sputnik had sent the US into a panic, it was a Jupiter C that launched America's first satellite, Explorer 1. It was a paperclip rocket. Suddenly, these men were national heroes. Von Braun was put in charge of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. His team, many of them also paperclip recruits, designed the Saturn V rocket, the very machine that took astronauts to the moon. Think about that for a second. The same minds that conceived a weapon of terror were responsible for humanity's greatest peaceful achievement. The same hands that sketched the V-2 sketched the Saturn V. It's a staggering historical pivot. I think about this a lot, as an engineer and an immigrant myself. The story of Operation Paperclip isn't a simple one of villains and heroes. It's a story of uncomfortable compromise. It asks us a very difficult question. Does the end justify the means? Can a person's monumental contribution to human progress wash away the moral stains of their past? We like our history clean, with clear moral lines. But history is messy. It lives in the gray areas. The United States made a Faustian bargain. In exchange for a shortcut to technological supremacy and, ultimately, to the moon, it offered redemption to men who may not have deserved it. It chose national survival and ambition over perfect justice. So what's the takeaway from this deep dive? For me, it's that progress is rarely pure. The path to the stars was paved with stones from a very dark quarry. Operation Paperclip forces us to hold two conflicting truths in our minds at once: the breathtaking beauty of the Apollo missions and the profound suffering that was, in a twisted way, part of its lineage. It's a reminder that the tools we create are never just tools. They carry the fingerprints of their makers, for better and for worse. Our job, as curious people, is to look at that history in full, the glorious and the grim, and understand how it all fits together to make our present world. Thanks for joining me for this exploration. If you found this dive into the complex legacy of Operation Paperclip thought-provoking, please do share this episode with a fellow curious mind. For more deep dive storytelling like this, make sure you're subscribed to the Curiosity Compendium wherever you get your podcasts. This is Ibnul J. Farabi from Light Not Studios. Until next time, stay curious.